Your day's coming.
Those words on the 1-year anniversary of the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, they gave us all chills. Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter speaking directly to the murderer. He believed could even be watching that very news conference.
Hey guys, so we are going to continue deep diving into the old criminal psychology. Before we do, a really important comment that someone brought up, which is someone said, you seem to have forgotten the legal principle, innocent until proven guilty. No, I haven't forgotten that principle. I am very aware of it. And it's a very important point to make and keep making. He is innocent until proven guilty, right? And so I think it does raise the question, what's the difference between speculating about Richard Allen and speculating about, let's say, Sammy Smith? What's the difference? Let's see what you guys say. Pauline Buckle says, that gives me comfort that he was certified to dispense medications. Okay. Hi, guys. Hi, Angela. Hi, Isimka Belinsky, James Houghton, Pauline Buckles. What is your response to this idea that he's innocent until proven guilty, and you have no right to speculate because he's innocent until proven guilty? How is that different to, or is that the same as speculating about Sammy Smith? What do you guys think about that? Van the Chimp, good to see you. Leah Simpson, good to see you. SM Kovalinsky says that presumption of innocence is only for the state. No, I'm not sure if I completely agree with that. I think he does have the legal right to be presumed innocent. Crime Time, Wine Time, good to see you. Oh no, another 2-hour live. I'm feeling like this is an addiction at this point. Not good to be addicted. Ricardo says he has to prove his innocence as well. That's a really good point. Mel Stiller, hello, Nick and chat. Good to see you. Desiree says darkness is in him now, outside influences. So can I address that question? Is if you say he has the right to be presumed innocent, which he absolutely does. So how is that different to, so if you're speculating about his innocence or his guilt, how is that different to speculating about Sammy Smith's innocence or guilt? Isn't it exactly the same thing? All right, let's, yeah, so SM Kovalinsky, there you go. There you go. The other thing is there was never a search warrant of Sammy's home, right? There were no charges against her. So at this point, what are we doing? We're following law enforcement's lead. Richard Allen's been arrested. He's been charged. He's been associated with this crime in the sense that, well, he's charged with the deaths of the 2 teenagers, right? So then you then take that's the lead, that's the sort of starting point, and then you go on from there. You don't assume that someone's going to be charged, going to be arrested, is guilty, right? So does that make sense? There's a big difference between someone isn't even charged, they aren't even accused, they aren't even arrested. There's no search warrant in the whole kind of thing, to something like this. And you might think that you're a lot cleverer than law enforcement, but maybe you're not. Maybe law enforcement who's investigating the case knows a little bit more than what you do, right? So the presumption of innocence is really important, especially on YouTube, but also when in a case like this, when someone has been charged and arrested, that presumption remains. And you've got to be careful making absolute statements because you strongly believe this or you strongly believe that. So you'll notice when I talk about Richard Allen, I will say that it looks like this, or it seems like that, or possibly this, or maybe that, right? Because it's still opening the door to the possible presumption or the possibility of innocence, right? But I think you've also got to acknowledge that when someone has been arrested by certain officers and there's a big press conference and there's the kind of media reporting, I think you can also acknowledge that there's also the possibility of guilt. The possibility of guilt. Do you guys see where I'm coming from? It's just really important to be explicit about that, because I think some people think it's just speculation, it's just speculation. No, there's a difference. Pauline says, I haven't been following this case, but weren't there several other suspects initially? Yes, there were at least 6 suspects. And there was also probable cause, I think, dealing with Ron Logan. There was literally where they said probable cause. That's where we are with this suspect as well. So you've got to be careful. Colleen Peake says, we have to admit Ali has kept leaks from happening. Yeah, they are trying to play this by the book, aren't they? Good morning, everyone. What does the heart of darkness in the poll refer to, please? Okay, anyone have any ideas? Let's have a look at that poll. In the poll refer to, please. The poll is, where do you think the center of Richard Allen's heart of darkness lies? Now, I'm purposefully a little bit ambiguous about that. You can decide what that means. But I find it really interesting that 77% say in his marriage. Very, very interesting. We're going to nevertheless probe both sides of that now. We're going to probe the job aspect, and it's going to bring up some really interesting aspects. And then we're also going to deal with his marriage, which is also going to bring up a lot of interesting aspects, possibly some that you haven't seen before or perhaps haven't heard about. Okay. Carolina says marriage, although his job was the catalyst. Do you think so? Verbal Judo says, I voted the job aspect. Yeah, it comes from Joseph Conrad. Sylvia, it's good to have some literary folks here. By the way, sorry that the book club has been postponed. It should have actually been around about now. That is the topic for tonight's book club is being postponed 2 weeks into the future. So sorry about that. Molly Brown says, I'll wager Richard hated his mother. That's quite a statement. I won't wager that. I would rather see what we know in terms of his family life. I did see a comment from a neighbor who said something like, there was no sign that there was anything wrong with him, and is totally surprised. I don't know if that means there was nothing wrong with him, or that neighbor's not particularly good at seeing red flags. Thanks a lot for that, Renee Mitchell. Desiree says, I can't answer the poll because I believe the darkness is already in the person. Okay, well, I must say we totally disagree on that point. I don't think you're born with darkness. I think you may be predisposed in your psychology. You may be, whatever it is, very introverted or very, maybe you struggle to connect with people. But I do believe that the fabric and the dynamics around you play a huge role. It's not just fate that this happens. That's my personal opinion. And so I hope, Desiree, I hope if you watch the rest of this episode, I hope you're going to get a sense of, I can actually see how certain connections could lead to certain psychologies, right? Psychologies don't exist in a vacuum. Okay, someone's asked about Colin Strickland. Where's that question? Terry Dean says, I did need more time, so that's cool. Wait, what says, when will the Strickland episode begin again? Probably within the next week or so. I do owe you guys 1 or 2 episodes on that. So I haven't forgotten. I definitely haven't forgotten. So yeah, that is something that's on the cards. So let's play a little bit more from this Fox 29, and then we're going to deal with the analysis. So let's go to that.
4 years ago. Now, that man arrested, Richard Allen, accused of killing the 2 8th-grade girls. He was living in Delphi before, during, and after that day. Superintendent Carter here now on the red couch.
So there you kind of have it in a very simple sort of broad strokes, is that he's accused of something specific. He's accused of killing 2 teenage girls, and he lived in the town. This was 5 years ago. He lived in the town before, during, and after, right? So if you wanted to say, well, he deserves the presumption of innocence, well, he does, but also did he have the opportunity? Did he have an alibi, kind of thing? But we still do need to ask the question, what connection is there? What is the connection that Richard Allen has to this crime? Is it DNA? Is it social media? Is it a tip from someone? Is it something that he admitted online or something? Is it some item of evidence that was found? Is it something that Keegan Klein said? What is it? What is this thing that is connecting them? Now, have any of you guys watched the HLN documentary? What is the title of it again? The Delphi murders, something like Have They Caught the Killer? Can you guys remember the exact name? I've only watched the last 5 minutes of that, and we are going to deal with certain search images from that. Did anyone watch that whole thing? Yeah, Sammy has nothing to hide. DNA, maybe it could be DNA. Thanks a lot, Rachel. Appreciate that. Leah says, my 14-year-old son asked why he didn't leave the area. Well, because he was living in plain sight, and he was succeeding at that. But I think a much better answer to that question is, I think he actually would have liked to, but he couldn't. And I think that goes to the heart of what we're talking about here. Leah, if I say, why do you think he couldn't leave the area? What do you think the reason is for that? Let's say he wanted to leave the area, but he wasn't able to. Why do you think that could be the case? So Koi Cat says, I don't think they had a happy marriage. She seemed to mock him with her laughter. Well, we're going to investigate that in this episode. WRFG Radio says, evil doesn't exist in a vacuum. Absolutely true. Sharon, there we go. That's also a very good point. So I have actually made contact with someone in Delphi, and I've asked them to go to certain spots, kind of as a TCRS investigator, and I'm hoping to get some footage to actually show you guys, like while we're doing these live streams, to show you some up-to-the-minute footage. So we'll see whether that comes about quite soon. Anthea says it would have looked suspicious if he left. It's a good point, but some people leave for different reasons. You could have said, well, his daughter graduated, so he doesn't need to live near a town, so he doesn't need to live near a school anymore, right? So that also happens. Kids graduate and or leave home. Well, then parents often change their own living arrangements, right? Okay, let's just deal with the last couple of comments here. Bob Williams, the FBI agent, said that BG's height as 5'9". Okay. Tracy Jackson says, is it true he committed himself for alcoholism? He was institutionalized. I don't know if it was right after, but it was sometime after. I don't know also whether he committed himself, but we are going to deal with something related to that. Okay, so let's kind of get started here. I want to show you guys this excerpt. Let's do that. You guys may have seen this before, but it's quite important that we focus on it. Can you guys see that? In the search warrant application, parts of which are redacted, the agent reveals that the murderer would have been covered in the victim's blood due to the, quote, large amount of blood that was lost by the victims at the crime scene. That is quoting from the warrant application. That comes directly out of the warrant application, not for Richard Allen, but for, I think it was Ron Logan, right? In other words, we got getting insight into the details of the crime scene from a previous probable cause scenario. Then it goes on to say, because of the nature of the victim's wounds, it is nearly certain the perpetrator of the crime would have gotten blood on his person, clothing, the agent wrote. Now, what do you think is the standout feature of that statement? Like, if you boil that down, you crystallize it to one thing, what do you think it is? What differentiates this high profile case from the Chris Watts case, from just trying to think of other cases, Casey Anthony, John Benet Ramsey, Jodi Arias, or is it similar to Jodi Arias? What is idiosyncratic, just in a very basic way, with that description? SW Firefly, thank you. Do you think the river search a few months ago could have found any evidence? I think it's possible. I mean, who knows? They may have found, for example, they may have found a gun. They may have found a gun that was thrown into the river and then maybe traced the serial number. That's definitely possible. So Mel Stiller says the blood evidence. Suzanne says, I hope we get to know his history. He had to get clearances. Okay. So I just want to say again, you are absolutely welcome to say the same thing. You seem to have forgotten the legal principle, innocent until proven guilty. You totally justified in saying that. You also totally justified in saying, I think, or asking, aren't you just speculating, or is your speculating informed, and is it anchored in the fabric of this case? Or how informed is your thought process? You totally justified to ask that, and you can ask it over and over again. And I welcome you to ask that question and also to answer that question, to say, well, I think it's not very informed. I don't think it's really anchored in much evidence. I don't think it's really anchored in the facts. Or you might say, I actually see how you going through the actual fabric. I understand what you're doing. It does make sense. You're welcome to keep asking, does that make sense? And see if it does. So you're totally justified in doing that. That's what we want to keep doing, is ask, does that make sense? Does that make sense, in terms of building this sort of thought palace, as Sherlock Holmes would put it. Okay, so let me kind of get going. So when you look at that excerpt, basically from the dealing with a crime scene, what you are really dealing with is a lot of blood, right? There's a huge amount of blood in this case. What is that talking to us about? And we're going to cycle back to all of that. We're going to come back to this whole idea. I'm just kind of putting it in there. I'm sort of bookending this discussion with that. We're going to come back to that. Now, according to Barbara McDonald, this was on the HLN exclusive. I think this was on yesterday. Allen's neighbors watched through binoculars as law enforcement swooped in on Richard Allen's home. This was just before noon on Thursday, October 13th. And this is a screen grab from HLN, from that documentary, right? Can you guys see that? Okay, I'll put it up a bit bigger, but I first want to just go through this. The neighbors said that they saw many law enforcement personnel in unmarked vehicles and unmarked uniforms, but kind of wearing khaki pants, descending on the Allen home. And all of this happened just before noon. So my question is, what were Richard and Kathy doing home in the middle of a weekday? Right? What are your thoughts on that? So law enforcement descend on the home. What are they both doing at home? Like, don't they have jobs? What's going on? Jill says you can't blame psychopathy on his wife or job. I don't really think, well, my personal opinion is it's not that he's a psychopath. Otherwise, if you do say that, you can basically say that person's a psychopath. Well, that's the end of the story. There's nothing else to talk about. It's not linked to his job. It's not linked to his marriage. It's not linked to the kind of person he is. It's not linked to anything. It's just linked to a mental disorder. And I don't, even if someone is a psychopath, I don't tend to go into that direction. I say, let's look at how the connections are made. Okay, Timmy, come. Let's now do the sort of Madonna and Child, the Nick and Timmy thing. So what were Richard and Kathy doing home in the middle of a weekday? Let's see what some of you guys say. CBS wouldn't be 9 to 5. Shift work. So it's not a bad that's not a bad thought. Okay, so I guess it's possible. Okay. According to HLN, the investigative reporter Barbara McDonald, Allen and his wife were asked to remain outside the home while the search went on. The search went on for about 9 hours. It's quite a long time, right? 9 hours. So can you guys see there's a sort of a circle there? Well, that is apparently where Richard Allen was, and I think his wife was in the vehicle, sitting in the vehicle. And so this was around, I guess, the middle of the day, and the search went on the entire afternoon until 11 o'clock that night. Pretty incredible. It's a long time to be searching. What were they searching for? And did they find anything during their search and seizure? Now, one thing that I think is definitely worth thinking about is in the middle of this search, based on what Barbara McDonald said, based on what the neighbors saw, it seemed like somewhere in the middle of the search, someone handed, the way I understand it, someone handed Richard Allen a piece of paper, which I presume was a warrant. Now, what I understand is they were already searching, and then they came back with I guess another warrant, unless I'm misunderstanding. And then basically, because of that warrant, they were able to take his vehicle. That's how I understand it. It could have been they handed him a warrant to begin with, but you would imagine the neighbors wouldn't see that because, yeah, unless they did see that. The way I imagine it is some of the law enforcement arrived, served the warrant, started searching, and then the neighbors noticed, started kind of spying on them, started looking, and then after something was possibly found, then maybe that probable cause, and then another warrant was served, in other words, to confiscate the vehicle, right? That's how I understand it. I could be wrong. I do think there are at least 3 possibilities for the police search of the Allen residence and what they potentially found. The first one is blood or DNA traces. Now, obviously, if they were doing a search, and they found blood or DNA, but 5-year-old blood or DNA, you would imagine they couldn't confirm the DNA that day. So how could they possibly confirm? Thanks a lot, Terry Deans provided the HLN link. What is the name of that HLN episode? I can't actually open maybe if I open it like this, I think it's something like yeah, so the title is Teen Girls Killer in Custody, ? Right? So they kind of also saying, in a weird way, they're saying, is he innocent? Have they caught the killer? They're kind of being rhetorical, right? Leah says, I'm home in the middle of the day, LOL. Yeah, I'm also. But yeah, you have Richard and his wife at home. So it just kind of raises the question, how do they earn money? And you could say maybe they work from home. It's just a question, right? It's a question about income and job, and that's really what we're talking about. Remember, the poll question is, where do you think the center of Richard Allen's heart of darkness lies? Only 20% say in his job. 79% say in his marriage. Really interesting, that divide, really, really interesting. Roses are red, good to see you. So Koi Cat says, probably never occurred to him to do that. Okay. James ML says that. Okay. Okay. So what I'm trying to get at is, if they did find DNA, they wouldn't have been able to confirm it like immediately. And if they found blood traces, that wouldn't necessarily mean anything, but they may have been able to confirm that it was blood traces. For example, if they used something like luminol, or if there were dogs there. And at this point, that's total speculation. Were there dogs there? I don't know. I didn't find any reporting about that. You would imagine if there were dogs there that would be mentioned, but that wasn't mentioned. I must say, in a way, you would think that there would be dogs there, right? But anyway, so how could you know that blood was found? So of the 3 possibilities, DNA/blood, I don't know if that's very likely. If they dug up the yard and found clothing or fragments of clothing, it's possible they also found DNA or hair fragments in the dirt. Any one of these items could be potentially inculpatory. So I think if they just dug in the yard and they found clothing, just that could be quite serious. Do you guys agree with that? Do you guys agree? If they dug in the yard and they found like clothing, like burnt clothing or pieces of clothing or jeans or something like that, or a coat, that could be quite serious. Sock says the crime is power motivated. Anthea says, I wonder how much free time he would have to spend on. That's an excellent question. That's a really good question. A very good comment. Okay. Now, let's go to the second possibility. Did they find something metallic, but possibly a souvenir in the search, right? So here is another image from HLN. I kind of want to make it a bit smaller. not that small. Let's do this. So when you look at that image, you can see just how many vehicles are there. They sort of go right around the corner. All of these vehicles are for this one search. You can see they are unmarked. You can see that there's a circle over there. Shall I take myself out the picture? Can you see there's a circled area over here? This is from HLN. And that is where Richard and his wife, they were sitting in this vehicle waiting for the search to sort of, finish. Now you can see in this image much later in the day. This is like late afternoon, even early evening. When you look at this image, that's quite early in the day. Obviously at this point, where's that other image? At this point, quite a few hours have gone by. The sun's even gone down, right? So this is obtained by HLN. So let's bring that up. That is courtesy of HLN. And yeah, so that's just from the search, okay? So in terms of metal or a souvenir, let me bring that up. Neighbors said it looked like law enforcement were using some sort of device to scan the ground. What do you think they were using? So you kind of literally had a situation of the neighbors like seeing all of these vehicles. They're there all day for hours on end. And they're like, what the hell is going on? And they literally looking through their binoculars and they're seeing people that look like, well, they're not obviously law enforcement, but they are basically agents and they are law enforcement. And they're trying to figure out what is going on. So as Asakari says, that's metal detector for sure. Sheila Richards says could be a knife, metal detector, metal detector. I think it could be a metal detector. It could also be ground penetrating radar, which you could in a way argue is arguably the same thing, right? That a metal detector is kind of searching for metal through the ground, but you also get ground penetrating radar that kind of searches not necessarily for metal, but for changes in the density of the ground and things like that. Okay. So anyway, we know they were using some other device, which shows that they were pretty invested. They didn't just come sniffing around like and then left. It was like a pretty intentional search. It feels like they had something serious to go on, doesn't it? Van Chim says, gee, if he kept a souvenir, he might not be as smart as we thought. Absolutely. So what if a metal detector or ground penetrating radar actually picked up something like a necklace or jewelry or a ring or something like that, right? What if that is what they actually found? Not DNA, not clothing, but actually a little bit of jewelry. So that's kind of my next question. Were they searching for jewelry, were they searching the river? In August, were they searching the river for jewelry as well? Where would someone dispose of a souvenir, right? So were they searching for jewelry or the murder weapon or both? Did they find the murder weapon? Right. Ricardo, thanks very much. Thanks for that. Okay. Paul Ward says it could be a memory stick from a computer. Suppose that's possible, but couldn't you just crush that and throw it in the garbage? You wouldn't need to bury it in the garden. Marcus says, how long would blood DNA survive? It's quite a good question. It can actually survive in certain circumstances for 75,000 years. So if blood DNA is deep enough in a bone, for example, or if it is fused to or kind of embedded in a piece of metal, it can survive for a very, very, very long time. Sunshine can destroy it. Water can destroy it. Bleach can destroy it. But if it's embedded deeply enough in the crevices of a bone or metal or something, or stones or something, it can last for a very, very long time. Okay. So this is another image from Fox 59, and that is showing where they excavated to some extent. Right? And it's right next to the shed. And apparently they dug small holes in several different areas. Now, I find it very interesting that, as I said, sometime in the middle of the search, Alan was handed a piece of paper and his car was then seized and towed away. Now, the reason why I say that I don't think it was like the law enforcement arrived at the scene. Good to see you here. We're just going through the search of Alan's property. So the reason why I say it feels like law enforcement arrived and searched, and then a lot of time went by, and then while they were still there, someone else pitched up. I think his surname was Liggett or something, or Levitt. But anyway, this person pitched up and then handed him, I think, a second warrant, a second piece of paper. And then they actually took his vehicle. They took the vehicle that he drove around in. They didn't take Kathy's vehicle. And when you look at this image, it kind of looks like the sun's not shining. It seems like this happened late in the day, right? It's not a really good quality image, but it looks like it was later in the day, which seems to suggest they got something out of that search, doesn't it? Does that make sense? It seems like they found something in their search which allowed them to see something else. And then you say, what could they possibly get from the vehicle, right? What do you think they could get from seizing the vehicle? What do you think the possibilities are? Vanderchim says one of the rumors is that they dug up a pet grave. Yeah, is a rumor. It's worth mentioning. Margie, good to see you. Welcome. Asakuri, the car could be seized in order to investigate tire match. That's all. That's well. No, they haven't been searching today. This is not today. I don't know if they have been searching today. I doubt it. So yeah, it could be tire matches. They could also have been monitoring the Allen residence and then noticed the vehicle went somewhere, or that someone went somewhere with a spade or whatever. You could have something like that. Maybe they want to look at the black box. They want to see where that vehicle has gone. They want to literally trace that vehicle's movements, right? And it could be that they could find biological traces in the vehicle. So also possible. If you could imagine if Bridge Guy perhaps he buried something in his garden, but later dug it up and then took it somewhere else. That might leave biological traces in the vehicle, right? That's possible. Okay. Yeah, that was October 13th. Okay. Why would they want the vehicle? Perhaps to examine, as I say, the black box, perhaps to analyze the fabric for traces of human DNA. Were cadaver dogs brought onto the property? Unknown. So this is another image from HLN. And there you can see again just how dark it is at this point. And look how many vehicles are there at this point as well. So certainly my impression, and I'm just saying what my feeling is, it seems like a couple of vehicles arrive early in the day, they search, then they find something, and then more vehicles arrive, and it becomes bigger and bigger, and then an arrest is announced the next day. Doesn't that seem like something was found, something was discovered, something important, right? Compare this image to, is it that one, right? There's just a couple of vehicles there. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's broad daylight. And then look at this. Look at all those vehicles now, and it's nighttime. There are far more vehicles later on, right? You guys see that? So it seems like they did a search and they found something, and that also then led to the arrest the next day. So can you see, if you speculating, it feels like, well, didn't law enforcement find something after all? The fact that they held a press conference to say we're arresting him seems like they did find something. Is that reasonable to say? Marcus says it seems certain that something was discovered. Yeah. I wouldn't say definitely. I would say it's likely. We've got to keep the door open to innocent until proven guilty. Okay. There are people talking about decapitation. I'm not thinking about that at all. I think that's really over the top. I'm really not thinking about decapitation. I think you guys are watching too many Jeffrey Dahmer episodes. That's just my personal opinion. But anyway, there's a third possibility. We've spoken about DNA and blood evidence, which could also be kind of related to fragments of clothing. We've spoken about what's the second one was jewelry or a souvenir or something else that could be metallic, like a murder weapon, right? A knife or a gun. And then there's a third element that they could also have found. And you don't need a really long time. You don't really need like days or weeks or hours to check someone's browser history, right? So they may have looked at digital breadcrumbs. They may have gone into the home and his computer was on, and then just looked at what was on the computer or in a cupboard. Looked at what was on his hard drives, like, or flash disks kind of thing. And so you also have that possibility. So let's have a look at yeah, in terms of tires, that's a good point. Most people change their tires well within 5 years, right? Biz Mama says, I'm looking forward to hearing what tip led them to him. Absolutely. We do want to know. And by the way, there is going to be a hearing on the 22nd in 20 days' time, almost 3 weeks' time. They're going to, the media, I think, are going to apply for kind of I think it's like an open records request, basically. We'll see what happens with that. I'll show you guys that document. Jennifer says maybe his wife had evidence. Yeah, so true with the digital age we're in. Aloha. Pet hair or fibers, that's also possible. But could they have found some digital breadcrumbs? Could they have found something on his computer? Okay, so that's that. Quite interesting, isn't it? So if law enforcement had to suddenly swoop into your home, look at what's on your phone or on your PC, would they find anything? What do you think they found on Alan's devices, right? Just think about that. If law enforcement had to swoop onto your home, what would they find? I'm not sure if they find at my home. They might find like searches for things like murder weapon and blood, how is DNA removed, and they might think, wow, we got you. No, I'm a true crime writer. Prove it. All right. Okay. So so that's the other thing is, did Richard know they were coming? And you would assume that he didn't. Anyway, that brings us to the number one clue that we ought to pay careful attention to. And it is possible that this kind of the number one clue is something that they found at the residence, right? Maybe they found what looked like blood in the ground in terms of luminol or something like that, where they said, this is blood, this is human blood. We know that there was a lot of blood at the crime scene. Timmy, try not to snore too loudly. Okay, let me take myself out of that. Okay, so basically what I want you to think about is just those words, large amount of blood, that's all. And the other thing that is a little bit subtle is that it's by both victims. It's not large amount of blood was lost by Libby or by Abby, it's by both of them. Okay. So now we're going to deal with this whole idea of the psychology. What does that mean? What does it mean when we're dealing with a perpetrator, right? And you can forget about Richard Allen. We're talking about whoever committed this crime left a lot of blood. What does that tell you about that person's criminal psychology, right? And that might be telling you about Bridge Guy, that might be telling you about the perpetrator, and that might be telling you about Richard Allen, and it might be all of them. Okay. So intertextually, which high-profile crimes that you can think of involved a bloodbath or a large shedding of blood or a large body count, right? So let's see how well you know true crime and what you can remember. Think about what comes to mind. Which high profile crimes that you can think of involved like a bloodbath, lots of blood. Let's see what you guys say. There we go. Yeah. OJ, Dharma, Jodi Arias is also a very good example. I don't really like Manson because he didn't commit the crime in person. But yeah, Jodi Arias, Jeffrey Dahmer, the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The murder of Meredith Kercher, definitely. Okay, so here's my list. The murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the murder of Kelsey Bereth, the murder of Gannon Stork, the murder of Meredith Kercher, Jeffrey Dahmer's trail of carnage. Okay, Timmy, I'm going to put you down. And then I would also include the Watts family murders, not because of blood, but because of the sort of body count. So that's also just the level of cruelty in that is, and callousness is just crazy, right? So, and also what he did certainly with his children. So if you start to put all of those together, you start to think about criminal psychology. As soon as you do that, as soon as you think about the crime scenes of the O.J. Simpson case, the Jodi Arias crime scene, the Kelsey Bereth crime scene, all of those, when you start just seeing those sort of almost like a flashing of images, you're starting to get a sense of criminal psychology, right? That's what we want to try and get in this case, right? Okay. So to be clear, every murder committed involves sadism, right? Every murder that is committed is sadistic. It's me at the literal expense of you. But some involve more unnecessary inflicting of pain than others, right? So let me give you an example of a possible crime and possible murder that possibly wasn't trying to inflict pain, right? Right? Just possibly theoretically, hypothetically, because in that case, the accused was acquitted, right? Kaylee Anthony, we don't know that there was an intention to hurt Kaylee. In fact, there's the idea that if it was done intentionally, the idea was not to hurt her. The idea was to put her to sleep, right? Does that make sense? So there you're seeing the opposite of someone wanting to hurt someone. You've got certainly the possibility of someone not wanting to hurt someone, right? But it's still, anywhere where someone is killed, it's sadistic. Aren't there a lot of other things you could do except do that? What I'm trying to say is there's certain crimes where the intention is to kill that person, but there's also the intention, I want you to suffer. I want you to be in pain. I want to hurt you on your way out of this world, right? In other words, there's a higher degree of sadism in that than another crime where there's not that. Does that make sense? And so where you see a bloodbath, there's a lot of sadism. And so the question then comes up, where does that sadism come from? Why is that? Why is it there? What is going on, right? And that brings us back to the poll, which is, where do you think the center of this person's heart of darkness lies? Is it in his job or in his marriage, right? You see where we're going? Okay. So the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the murder of Kelsey Bereth, and the murder of Meredith Kircher were particularly sadistic. What did their killers feel they need, why did their killers feel they needed to settle a score? Do you agree that they did need to settle a score? Do you agree that when you see all of that, it's trying to settle a score? That is not a personality disorder. No, anyone can be sadistic. So I'm going to show you how sadism comes about. Okay. And then also, what do all of these cases have in common? Where you have this sadism, what do these cases have in common, right? Okay. So the first thing they've got in common is sadism. The murder of Kelsey Bereth, and especially the manner of that murder. I did write a book about that, Murder Most Foul, was completely unnecessary. But one has the sense that someone derived pleasure, in Dahmer's case, not just pleasure, but sexual gratification from the evisceration of his victims, right? In Bridgeguy's case, there may be something similar, a sense of euphoria, a sense of power, maybe mixed with a sexual impulse, maybe not. But there can only be this sort of thing, this is so important, there can only be this sort of thing in an individual who feels emasculated, powerless, weak, and impotent to begin with. So what is the source for this insufficiency? So in other words, where somebody needs to create this bloodbath, but basically where there's this big spectacle of unnecessary pain, you can't have that without something on the other side being emasculation, powerlessness, weakness, impotency, something in that area which basically comes down to what I call insufficiency, right? In other words, it's kind of, what's the word? To us, it seems like overkill, right? But to them, it's a kind of rebalancing of whatever they're feeling, right? Insufficiency. Insufficiency. You guys familiar with that word? Let me define it. Okay, can you see that? The condition of being insufficient, lack, inadequacy, shortage, want, deficit, shortfall, right? Let's see what it says here. What is the cause of insufficiency? Okay, that's something medical. What's a synonym for that? Deficit. What is an example of being inadequate? Not good enough, not adequate. Okay, you get where that's going. There's another word that addresses that whole idea very well, which is just insignificance. What's the opposite of insignificance? Well, significance, importance, status, all those things. And does Richard Allen fit that profile? Is there a sense of insufficiency about Richard Allen? It's a question. You might say yes, but even if it's true, how does he? What is the source of that insufficiency? What is the source of the malaise? And that's where we go into the profile again, but in a different way this time. Okay. So now we're going to go again to the psychological profile, but in a different way. I think I need to bring up this house. Have you guys seen that before? You guys know what you're looking at over there? So in order to answer this question, we've got to return to the psychological amphitheater we touched on yesterday, our profile. Although we may have touched on these areas, these psychological territories, we never dealt with them through the filter of either sadism or anality. A what? Think of the anal sadistic continuum as something that exists in all of us. So you might think, okay, now what on earth are you talking about? So if you think about someone who's anal, so let me give you a good example, but a neutral example. If I take my dog for a walk and my dog insists only on smelling things, right? In other words, the dog is trying to connect to other dogs through smelling things, scents, might be excrement, it might be signals or whatever, this, that, and the next thing, right? But what happens if there's a dog running around, there's another dog running around, but your dog just insists that the smells are just so much more fun than actually encountering another dog? Well, then your dog has become quite anal. In other words, it's fixated with feces and urine and whatever, instead of what the point is of that is that it meets other dogs. In other words, it's more excited by the idea of a dog than the dog itself. And you get people like that as well. They're more excited by whatever, pornography or I don't know, movies or fiction or books or something that's derivative of people but not actually people, right? That can be someone who's getting quite anal. It is not being in the lived experience, it's being in away from that. Something that's similar to that but not quite the same is a fetish. So for example, if you are obsessed with someone's feet or shoes, then you are not connecting with a whole human experience, you're connecting just with a part of it, right? That's similar. It's not quite the same, but it's a similar thing. So the opposite of being anal is kind of like being prepared to have an authentic encounter with a person, like a full encounter. I mean, the best example of a very anal individual is Jeffrey Dahmer, that he'd rather have encounters with corpses and organs that are inanimate. He'd rather have his lived experience with something that is dead than someone that is alive. That's the definition of it. And so anyone who's very anal tends to be very sadistic. Anyone who's very sadistic, there's something anal about them, right? And that exists in all of us. But the more balanced we are, the happier we are, the more connected we are to one another. And life affirming things like getting out there, exercising, socializing, being in the real world, well, the more we do that, the less anal we are. The more variety there is in our experiences, the less anal we are, and thus the less sadistic we are. But the same equation works in reverse. So if this crime in terms of the Delphi murders, if it points to an unusually high degree of sadism, then what is possibly feeding or potentially fueling that sadism, right? Do you guys see the point? If you say what we're seeing in the Delphi murders is a unusually high degree of sadism. So what was fueling that? So the answer is anality, yes, but specifically what? Specifically, what kind of anality, what, where, when, and how, right? And I think there are 2 or 3 basic possibilities to that question. In other words, what was fueling Bridge Guy's anality, right? And we're going to go through two kind of dimensions: the job dimension and the marriage dimension, right? Okay, someone left a super chat. Lelny says, thanks a lot for that. Okay, so let's continue. So I think there are 2 or 3 possibilities. We're going to start with humdrum job. Sorry, I'm kind of struggling to enunciate. So in terms of that, now you can be anal if you work in a job that you hate, or it's a job that is extremely repetitive, or it's a job that is very like being a zombie, like you don't deal with living human beings. You deal with studying feces or studying viruses or something like that, or taking dirt out of people's teeth, right? The issue isn't whether it is a humdrum job. The issue isn't whether it is a humdrum job. It's whether you think it is. So it's not a case of that being a dentist is going to make you anal. It's a question of, do you enjoy your job? It might be something that someone else may not enjoy. The thing is, if you hate your job, you keep doing it, or you do something that's really not healthy and you keep doing it, that can be really unhealthy. So the question is, did Bridge Guy have a humdrum job? I don't know why I'm struggling to say it. Humdrum job, right? And what do you think the answer is to that? Do you think he did have a humdrum job? Verbal judo says perhaps deeming his job is beneath him. Yeah. If you think that you are too good for your job, but you keep working in that job, what does that say about your self-esteem? Absolutely. If you living a role that you feel you don't want to be in, but you feel like you're powerless to get out of it, then it can feel like humdrum. Your job makes you feel like you're a zombie. So let's just do this. So what are we talking about? Humdrum, lacking excitement or variety, boringly monotonous routine.
Humdrum, humdrum, humdrum.
Okay. Dull, dreary. It's not whether you think it is, it's whether he thought it was, right? And is part of the reason why you had this awful case, this awful incident where 2 teenagers were attacked and everything that happened, was it because someone in some other area of their life, they were really bored? They were really frustrated with how dull and unexciting their life was. SW Firefly says all jobs are humdrum. Not so sure about that. No passion. So if we take Chris Watts and Jeffrey Dahmer, I don't think they were particularly unfulfilled in their jobs. Do you guys agree or disagree? Do you think that they were like very unhappy in their work? I do think they were particularly unfulfilled in other areas, particularly in terms of their romantic and sexual engagements. But I have a feeling Bridge Guy was unfulfilled in his job. Don't you guys? Don't you guys have a feeling Bridge Guy wasn't terribly happy with his work? Jane says he just wanted his mind elsewhere. Maybe an intelligent man with unfulfilled potential, maybe not. Maybe an unintelligent man with unsatisfied wishful thinking. Magic says, I think the entire thing comes from his childhood and he has the genetics. Okay. Okay. Carolina says his job was a very big step from Walmart. That's quite a good point. But now let's look at that. So let's bring this up. Can you guys see that? Can you guys see? Okay. So I don't think it was necessarily that he was bored or not busy, but that it was a somewhat low-paying and inconsistent income. Right? I don't think the issue for him was that the job was boring as much as that it was low-paying and the income may have been somewhat inconsistent based on does he get a shift or doesn't he, right? According to Stephanie, who's a pharmacy tech herself, she said he's basically a middle-aged man doing a minimum wage job. That can't feel very good. And he's certainly not the breadwinner in the home equation. That to me was just something Stephanie said, by the way, and I found it tremendously insightful. So what she's saying is he's not earning a lot of money. He's middle-aged, which makes it even worse. I mean, he only qualified at like age 45, I think. And with that kind of salary is definitely not going to be the breadwinner. Stephanie would know because she's in that sort of area, right? So he's not going to be the breadwinner in the home equation. I think that's really the main point here. If he's not the breadwinner, then what's going on the home front? Public art critic says this wasn't a one-man crime. We want to focus for now on what we know and what we, the person that's been arrested, not on the person who hasn't been arrested. So can you see there's a potential source for feeling like a nobody and a nothing? Can you see that? Remember we're talking about humdrum and we're talking about insufficiency. So if you're not the breadwinner and you're earning minimum wage, can you see you sort of feel like a nobody and a nothing? Take away money from anybody or give someone else a financial range in a relationship. And what you may have is instant impotency. Isn't that, do you guys agree with that? That's often how quickly someone can kind of lose their self-esteem. Just in the area of not having much money, you address all the areas of insufficiency. You don't have much money, so lack of control, weakness, powerlessness, impotency, a sense of feeling emasculated, and lacking agency. Does that make sense? So if you can kind of ignore all of the details about being a pharmacy tech and just say, well, the bottom line is that you don't earn a lot. Well, how's that going to make you feel in terms of status in society or in a marriage? Like, you don't need to know the details. Like, what time does he go to work and does he do this or does he do that? No. Just how much does he earn? Although all that's important, but also how much does he earn? We also have a sense that Alan didn't work full time. He was on sort of standby, right? So he's earning a minimum wage, but he's also kind of on standby. That makes it even worse. So it says here, let me take that away. He was mostly either the shift leader or shift support when he worked. Let me hide that away. Okay, can you see over here? I was a shift supervisor during my time in there, and I personally worked with him every time we had a truck for the week, if not 3 to 4 times a week. But there it is. He was mostly either the shift leader or a shift support. It says somewhere else here that he was only really a backup technician if needed. Look at those words. He was only really a backup technician if needed. How does that feel? We don't need you. You're just a backup. Don't worry, we don't need you. No thanks. We don't need you to come into work today. No, thank you. So can you see it? It does look like there was an aspect to Richard Allen's life where his job, he had kind of a humdrum job. I don't know why I'm struggling to say it. Okay, now we're going to deal with humdrum marriage. That's a lot easier to say. Falls off the tongue. Humdrum marriage. Guys, I'm in a humdrum marriage. It's just so humdrum. Okay, so let's have a look at the poll. Now we were for a moment exactly 80-20. It's now 79-21. Can someone vote for in his marriage? Bring it back to 80-20. Where do you think the center of Richard Allen's Heart of Darkness lies? 79% say in his marriage. Let's check that. Now, how are we going to do that? We're going to go back to Chris Watts. Chris Watts basically towed the line in his marriage because to not do so, he'd learned wasn't worth the opprobrium. That's not my opinion. That's what he himself said. It just wasn't worth arguing about things or standing up to his wife. Now, yesterday we dealt with archetypes. The fact that generally men prefer younger women in terms of desirability and women prefer older men. Now, some people were very upset with me and they said, how dare you suggest that what was it? How dare you suggest that if his wife was older than him, that ... But it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about archetypes. And the archetype is what is typical, just what is generally typical with people, right? That's really what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the archetype. So don't argue with me and don't say, well, that's not nice what you're thinking. What does the archetype say? So it's an archetype based on the narrow codex of the archetype. Richard and Kathy did the opposite, just as Chris Watts and Shanann did the opposite in terms of desirability, in terms of this basic archetype of desirability, which is men tend to marry younger women. Well, Chris Watts didn't do that. Richard Allen didn't do that. And then you say, was Chris Watts the leader in that relationship? Was Richard Allen the leader of that relationship? And then you say, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Well, in their marriage, did it matter? Not in your marriage, in their marriage. It's also possible Alan's entire impotency comes from not having much money or work status. So on the one hand, but it's also possible his marriage deepened that sense of feeling worthless. So can you see how you can not have a lot of money in your work, that's bad enough. But now in your marriage, you don't have money, but your wife does. Right? In other words, you have impotency in terms of your work. Is that aggravated in your marriage? And I think it's very hard not to. Like even a wonderful, kind, generous, considerate wife, even if she's bending over backwards and being very sweet and very compassionate, it's quite hard for the man not to feel impotent anyway, right? It's hard for him not to feel inadequate anyway. It's hard for him not to feel emasculated anyway. So do you remember when we dealt with the type of impotency, this type of impotency in the Chris Watts case? FBI agent Coder recognized it very early, and he was right. He said the following. So just to get you guys on the same page, we are coming to Richard Allen by way of Chris Watts, right? We're going to come back to anchoring this in reality. I'm not like going into the Chris Watts case and never coming back. We're like a boomerang. We're going into the fabric of the Chris Watts case. We're going to grab some insights, then come right back, right? So just give me about 5 minutes to do that. So can you read what it says there? Coder told Chris, we were very concerned about his wife and daughters then. Coder told Chris that he shouldn't have been, that it shouldn't have been the happiest time in their marriage. It should actually, it should have. Coder said he believed Shanann may have been a controlling person who didn't listen to him and could do whatever she wanted. Now, if you just left that there, if you didn't take that any further and you just left that there, you might say, oh, okay, maybe Shanann was a controlling person. But if you actually go to the moment that he says this, then you get a totally different idea. So I'm going to play that audio for you guys right now. I don't want you to think about this in terms of Chris Watts. Think about it in terms of Richard Allen. Think about what Coder says in terms of Richard Allen. Okay. So hopefully I can find that link very quickly. Okay. Give me a moment. I'm almost there. Okay.
Okay. And I believe that Shanann's the reason none of that happened. I believe that she's a controlling person. Maybe doesn't listen to you as much as she should. I think that she can do whatever she wants and you can't. Okay? I think if you were to go to a restaurant, she would order whatever the hell she wants. And as soon as you order a nice steak, she says, whoa, buddy. Okay? A woman that lets her man do all of the backpack.
Okay, so do you guys see what's kind of going on there? It's really Coder trying to figure out why isn't Chris Watts happy in his marriage? Well, imagine a simple little scenario where they go to eat dinner. Can he order whatever he wants, right? And what does Coder say about that? Let's go back to that again. He talks about going to a restaurant, right? Listen to the audio again. Listen to that.
Okay, and on top of that, you look pretty good now. You're pretty fit, okay? This should have been a time in your marriage where you guys were happy and thriving and productive, okay? And I believe that Shanann's the reason none of that happened.
So what he's doing here, what Coder's doing is kind of mind fuckery, kind of playing devil's advocate, kind of saying, Chris, I know what you're going through. I know how hard it is being married, right? And it's quite interesting that Tammy Lee, who wrote this statement, left that part out, right? But what he's kind of doing is it's kind of mind fuckery. He's kind of saying to Chris Watts, you know, are you ever given or allowed agency in your marriage? Not the agency your wife thinks is appropriate or what you think or I think is appropriate, but what he thinks and he feels is appropriate. Can he, for example, can he order whatever he wants when they go and eat a meal, right? So let's listen again to what Coda says. He says, I believe Shanann's the reason none of that happened. Now think about that from Richard Allen's perspective. I believe that the reason I can't do this and that is because of you. I believe that the reason why that and that is because of you, right? Of course, Richard Allen didn't kill his wife. So Coda says, I believe that she's a controlling person, maybe doesn't listen to you as much as she should. I think she can do whatever she wants and you can't. I think if you were to go to a restaurant, she would order whatever the hell she wants. And as soon as you order a nice steak, she says, whoa, buddy. Now, what is he getting at there? It's basically someone who feels things are quite anal in his marriage, right? You get that? That his marriage is humdrum. His marriage is tedious, dull, boring, unexciting, and he feels insufficient inside of it. He doesn't really want to be there. So why doesn't he leave? That's also quite an important question. If he's not happy in his marriage, why doesn't he leave? Well, because he's dependent. He's financially dependent. Because he doesn't have money. Because he needs her to have a life, to pay the bills. Which further worsens that sense of I'm a nothing, right? Coda is right, is on the right track with the entitlements, the male psychology, to the entitlements the male psychology in this psychology feels he deserves, and he's angry because he's not getting it, right? So let me play that again, and I'm going to show you something that's quite interesting. Where is that? Is it this one?
I believe that she's a controlling person. Maybe doesn't listen to you as much as she should. I think that she can do whatever she wants and you can't. Okay? I think if you were to go to a restaurant, she would order whatever the hell she wants. And as soon as you order a nice steak, she says, whoa, buddy.
Okay. Coda isn't wrong here. When Watts ordered a salmon and a beer, Shanann did want to know and wasn't happy about how much he'd spent. Same with parking at the airport, right? That's also from the Discovery. Chris ordered a salmon and a beer, and then Shanann wanted to know about the $62 charge, right? You may remember Shanann texted him to say, keep the receipt and give it to me. And you can imagine he didn't want to do that. And he couldn't do that because he was cheating on her, right? So that idea of I don't have agency in my marriage, and how it's expressed is when you go to a restaurant, you can't order what you want. Think about that a lot, that idea of there's a menu of life. You know, I want to go on holiday over there, or I want to buy that vehicle, I want to buy that shirt or those shoes, or I want to do this or I want to do that. You can't choose from the menu. Someone else is going to choose from the menu. Why? Because you can't pay. You can't pay for the thing that you want. So someone else is going to pay for it. They're also going to choose for you. Well, how does that end up feeling? Now, fortuitously, we've got precisely this insight. Richard Allen and his wife eating in a restaurant, and we can study their dynamic through this particular incident. And guess what we see? We see trouble in paradise. Can you guys see that? Let me bring that up a bit bigger. So this is a restaurant in, I guess, a pub type restaurant in Delphi. It's called the Brick and Mortar Pub. And that is where they often went. It's really close to where they lived, right? I'll show you guys a map in a moment. So on October 30th, just about 3 or so days ago, Fox 59 reported That's from this article. I'll put a link to this in chat, just so you can see where I got this information from. Let's go back to, is it that? Okay. So according to Fox 59, Delphi residents said they often saw Alan in their community, either working at a local pharmacy or dining out with his wife. So that's really where they saw him, working or eating, right? And so when they saw him eating, apparently they didn't see him talking very much to his wife. So this is quoting from the article. One of my servers was telling me, this is according to Chandler Underhill, the general manager at the brick and mortar pub, is that he didn't really speak. And you see that quite obviously in the social media, that his wife is chattering, his wife is laughing, and he's like mute. He's a passenger in the story. He's a spectator in his own life, in a way. Right? And so this general manager said, one of my servers told me that he wouldn't speak much. His wife would order the food and they would split it. His wife orders the food, not him. Why do you think that that's the case? Why is his wife ordering and not him? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? So he feels insufficient, insignificant, silent, small, unhappy, miserable. But he's got to just stick it out because he doesn't really have any other option, does he? So this is a map of that pub. Let me get rid of that and do that. So can you see that's where he lives? And it is only 1 mile, 1.2 miles, 3 minutes drive from there to the brick and mortar pub, right? It's really not far. You can imagine they went there quite often. It's just a mile away. And look at what they crossed in order to get there. They crossed the Deer Creek, which is where the Monan High Bridge crosses over as well. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, but that stream of consciousness, the stream of consciousness under this kind of artery of movement, that stream of feeling lesser than, or I didn't get what I want, runs in a fluid ribbon from that pub to the Monan High Bridge. Look at that. Look at that. There's the pub. There's the bridge. And so that's where he can rebalance the scales. That's where he can feel like a big man again. Because not having money in a marriage, as Chris Watts didn't, can lead to the same end result: lack of control, lack of agency, feeling helpless, feeling emasculated. Not to put too fine a point on it, but Watts was surrounded by female figures in his family, so too Alan. He wants to feel like a man. And there is more reason to believe the marriage wasn't smooth sailing throughout. Is this a YouTube video?
Anything designed to try.
So I'm not going to play this YouTube video, but this is something else from Fox 59 that shows and proves something dealing with his backstory. I'm just waiting for this ad to finish. So that's the source of the story. I'll put a link in chat. Just a second. So it's from this video. I'm not going to play the whole thing. But what it's dealing with is a prior incident. According to Fox 59, in 2015, as recently as 2 years prior to the murders, Alan was allegedly drunk, which led to a domestic issue, and his wife took him to a Lafayette hospital. No action was taken, but deputies were sent to his home to keep the peace, right? So just 2 years before this, there was an incident that led to the police coming to his home. And so the question is, what demons was Alan fighting? What do you think the answer is to that? What demons was he fighting? The image I'm going to show you now is the home that he grew up in Mexico, Indiana. It seems kind of, what word were you I don't know what's wrong with me. So I guess it's the antibiotics. Or it's just, I don't know. What word would you use to describe that home? Spacious, quaint, or nondescript? What word would you think about that? That's quite interesting. Mary Tanner says, I don't honestly know why we're discussing what kind of person he is. Mary, what would you like to discuss? Just like what did you think we're going to be talking about? What would you like to discuss? Okay, so there are some say shabby, some say average, some say humble, some say plain. Liesl McGuire, thanks a lot. Thanks for that. Yeah, a small house does not mean poor, but certainly it's not extravagant. It's not palatial. It's not Mar-a-Lago, right? So when I look at that, I think it looks kind of nondescript. That's my thought, right? Again, what does nondescript mean? Lacking distinctive or interesting features or characteristics, right? Featureless, undistinguished, unremarkable, right? Wouldn't you say that the house seems that way, but also doesn't Richard seem that way? Richard seems nondescript. Where he grew up was quite nondescript. In his marriage, isn't he quite nondescript? In his job, isn't it quite nondescript? In other words, it's quite ordinary. It's quite dull, and it's like, is this my life? Is this unexciting dreariness my life? So what we may have is an ego problem, just as simple as that. What we may have is a self-esteem problem, but then also a power problem. And all of that can stem just from money problems. And money problems can stem from addiction problems. What came first, the chicken or the egg? What came first, the addiction or the money problems? The money problems or the addiction? Lisa Stokes says his wife is a veterinarian, so of course she makes quite a bit of money. Yeah. Yeah, so they're definitely not living in a simple, they're not, they're not, they've got quite a nice home. And maybe he wants to stay in that home. even if you can't contribute much to it. So how do you cheat your way around that? How do you cheat your way out of an ego problem, a self-esteem problem, a power problem, a moneyless problem? How do you cheat your way around it? How can you get instant power and instant satisfaction? If you can't stand your life, if your life is this horrible humdrum that you refuse to leave, how do you cheat your way out of it? How can you get instant relief from that? Yeah, I think it is a vet tech. I think that's right. It is a vet tech. So I do wonder, looking at this image of 23-year-old Brittany Allen, who's now Brittany Zapanta, where the bridge guy was standing there while the photographer was photographing his daughter, or did he take the photo? So look at that image. I can't help thinking when I look at that image, where was bridge guy? Was he standing there? Did he take the photo? If this photo was taken in 2017, it could only be early 2017 or late 2017. Do you know why? Because of that. It's winter. Did you guys notice this? If you look at this image, it was also taken in winter. As far as I know, this image was taken in 2017. It's not the same as the timestamp. It was posted July, I think July 6, 2018, but it was taken, I believe, in 2017. What could only have been taken in late 2017 because it's winter, or early 2017. What are the chances that Brittany would have posed there after the crime? So doesn't it make sense that she must have posed there in January 2017, just before the crime took place? What do you guys think about that? Does that make sense? I don't know. I think that's like quite a big epiphany if it's true. Hope says, I think his boyhood home looks enclosed, very small windows. SW Firefly says, I agree, because he would not want to pose there after that. Yeah. Okay. So if this photo was taken in 2017, could only be early or late 2017, right? If Alan did watch his daughter being photographed, or if he'd photographed her, perhaps the idea of holding something other than a camera and being in a situation like that, being in control, in an environment he knew and liked, maybe it appealed to him. Maybe it was when this photo was taken, maybe that's when an idea occurred to him. So the number one clue that we mustn't forget about is the sadism of this crime, right? That's the number one clue that we mustn't lose sight of, that it was sadistic, the cruelty, the violence, the amount of blood. It speaks about a psychological anality. And does it seem if Alan was struggling with feelings of insignificance and impotence? It's a question. Does it seem as if Alan was struggling with feelings of insignificance? Susanna says it could be taken by a boyfriend. Yeah, it could be. But it's very likely that he saw it. If his wife saw it, he must have seen it. Right? Okay, so that is it from me. Something I want to just draw your attention to is this public notice. This was sent to me by SM Kovalinsky. Thanks very much for that. Oh, you guys can't see it. Okay. So there's a public notice. there will be a hearing on November 22nd, so 20 days from now, just less than 3 weeks. The hearing is to determine the sealing of the record under, should be case number whatever. So it's really to, I think, lodge an open records request, essentially, and argue the rights of the media to access the document. We've also seen the sheriff talking about, Doug Carter talking about that the sealed document's temporary. It's not going to be sealed forever. I just want to see if I can bring that up where he mentions that. I don't want to play the whole thing. See where I can find it. See if I can just find where you are. We talks about it being temporary.
I want to start with taking us to the day when you knew you had the evidence and you could actually not announce it, but that you could make the arrest. What was that day like?
First, thank you for welcoming me here. It was surreal, and
Yeah, I don't want to play the whole interview, but it's basically in this clip he does talk about it is temporary. So, you know, that is something we must also accept. You can say, yeah. So obviously once that comes out, there will be more information that we can base our analysis on. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the poll. Where are we with that? 80-20, there we go. So 80% of you think that the if Richard Allen has issues, they're mostly in his marriage. But I do think his job plays a part in that. You could almost argue that if his job was fine, you know, if he was happy in his job and all of that was taken care of, then his marriage would be less of a problem. But yeah, it definitely does look like it. Same with Chris Watts. What is the bigger issue, his job or marriage? I think people could reasonably and rationally say 80% would say his marriage, that they weren't that happily married. His job wasn't really an issue. He's quite happy in his job. Okay, so let's have a look at some of your comments. Marcel, I was late. I'll have to go back and listen to the whole live. This one is slightly shorter. I'm going to try and cap it off at 1:45. I do want to deal with Amanda Knox quite soon. So look out for that. I do want to deal with what's been going on with Amanda Knox. I've written 5 books on the Amanda Knox case. So I'm hoping to cover that quite soon. Let's have a look at your comments. Did he have the same job before he was married? I don't think so, because he got married, I think, in 1991. He only got this job in 2017. So he got this job really, really late. I'm pretty sure he was unhappy at both. But where was he particularly unhappy and trapped? Zircon says you didn't give us a combo answer because I wanted you to commit one way or the other, right? Okay, let's go through some final comments. Sleuth and Sandals. Melly says, don't you think that's so odd that he took that pic? Well, we don't know who took that pic, but it is odd. That picture is definitely odd. We want to know more about that picture. Who took it? When was it taken? Who was there? We definitely want to know about that. Tracy Jackson says, will we ever truly understand people like him? Well, hasn't this hasn't this analysis helped you to understand him better already? It's okay to say no. Like if you feel like, no, I don't really feel like I know anything more. But I hope it has helped some of you. I definitely feel like the restaurant comment that he didn't talk much and his wife ordered, that already speaks volumes. Victoria, good to see you here. I'm late to the party, but sending greetings anyway. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Victoria. Hope you had a good Halloween. I bet anything acknowledged. Okay. Yeah, it was posted then, but we don't know when it was taken. You know, if you look at that picture, you can actually see it was taken in winter. You can see the trees don't have leaves on. Well, July is summer in America, so it's definitely not taken when it was posted. And bear in mind, it was posted on her mother's Instagram. That's good to hear, Jane. Tracy says everyone hit like. Okay. Sleuth and Sandal says his wife seemed to tease him a lot. You kind of get the idea that she was trying to break the tension. She was trying to make it casual and fun and enjoyable, right? And he was taking himself very seriously. Carolina says, notice in the video the wife refers to him as my husband. Okay, let's deal with some last messages. If you have an email, I can send you the other two grad pics. It's not Instagram. Is Terry here? I don't like to put my email in chat, but you're welcome to. Can you see what's on the bottom there? You can see my Twitter handle is ticketing or ticking along the bottom of the video. You can contact me on Twitter at Crime Rocket. Anthea says, could it be possible that he was doing that? No, I don't think there was any dismembering. I think you're watching too much Jeffrey Dahmer. Dismembering is quite rare. It's not like everybody does it. Roses are red, thanks for that. The cat ate my homework says, I grew up in a very small, undistinguished apartment. I wish I grew up in a house. But I haven't killed anyone. Sorry, that's the wrong comment that I've highlighted. Yeah, so it's always a mistake to say that person didn't like his job. I don't like my job. I'm not a killer. It's not about you. It's also someone may feel differently about living in a certain way, and someone may feel differently about not having any money, and someone may feel differently about not speaking in a relationship. So let's just take that aspect. Would you feel comfortable just not speaking in a relationship? I think that's quite a good thing. He felt that he was a piece of furniture. Calgo says many things adding to bake a murderer cake. Yeah. So when you look at the image next to me, you see half the face is Richard Allen and half the face isn't. Well, that's because we're getting some of our story from the fabric of this case, but there's certainly a part that we don't know, right? So we're trying to figure it out, and we might be getting some of it right, some of it wrong. It's up to you guys to decide that makes sense or that doesn't make sense, right? I think there are a lot of cases where murders are committed to deal with kind of inadequacy. Think about Jodi Arias. Her boyfriend wants to break up with her. What does she do? She wins the power battle by doing what she does, right? It's often about things like power, control, in this case, insufficiency. Jennifer Waite says, I think money is part of the puzzle. Yeah, it very often is. Remember, Juan Martinez, in the Jodi Arias case, said, in his experience, crimes are invariably about sex, and if they're not about sex, they're about money. And they're often about both. That's very true. Okay, last couple of comments. Susanna says it makes sense to me. Helen says, going to wait for more facts before I think about details. You don't want to think about any details. You're allowed to think a little bit. Run the World says we need to know more about his story. Absolutely, we need to. There's a lot we need to know. We need to know about his parents. We need to know about his high school. We need to know about his childhood. We need to know about what kind of person was he. What was he interested in? We need to know what was his wife like, right? We need to know, was he on social media? Also, what was his relationship like with his daughter? What was her relationship with her father? Someone says not enjoying, where is it? Someone says you look like Richard Allen, really? Okay. Thanks. Not enjoying his life, he decided to escape into his fantasies. Okay. Calgirl says, I feel it starts in childhood. Yeah, it can. Someone left a super chat. I think we're going to end off there. Roses are red. Thank you so much for that. Lincoln Howard says, I think he looked so scared in the car when his wife snuck up on him. I don't know if he looked scared. I thought he looked peed off. That was my impression. That's really good to hear. That is the point of it, is to kind of give you a sense of I'm getting a bit of a handle potentially on the criminal psychology. So that's good if that's what you feel. Okay, so I just want to thank everyone who's come in. Most of you really great to have you here. There are here and there's some pretty unkind comments, but that's par for the course. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for being here. Thanks a lot for the super chats. Ali B also says he looked angry. Someone says he was caught off guard. But thanks a lot for being here. Remember, if you're watching this on replay, you're welcome to hit the thanks button. I just want to welcome all the new subscribers. Also, if there's something you wanted me to talk about in terms of the DELPHI case that I haven't addressed, or you want addressed in more detail, leave that in the comments, not in chat, because I'm about to end off this live, but leave it in the comments, a particular area that you'd like me to look at, and then we can definitely look at that. But I do feel like I've covered a lot of the main stuff that I want to cover. So from here on out, I don't know, I kind of want to defer to what comes out in the investigation. If something else comes out, also if I'm sent footage from locals, then we can look at that as well. But I've sort of covered most of the territory that I wanted to cover. So there we go. Tracy says, thanks for keeping my mind working. Cool. Yvonne, yeah, I just not going to hate. Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. Helena says we'll watch on replay. Thanks, guys. I will try and ignore the rudeness. Thanks. Cool. Okay, guys, take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.